Here in the Daughters of Utah Pioneers Museum, I was actually told about this by Kevin Kraut, Ogden Kraut's son. And he described it as a seer stone, but mostly a protection stone. And traditionally, bloodstones are jasper, or kind of silicate rocks with jasper flecks in them. And historically, Mormonism has a lot of kind of folk healing or folk magic in it, and that was the very beginning of the church. And suspended within this rock, you've got flecks of jasper. And back in the day, it was thought that this helped cure hemorrhagic blood. I mean, the same thing that Rasputin was kept around for. The Tsar's son had hemophilia. So the legend here is that the descendant of Anne Wood Brown was on the ship with Captain Cook, who discovered the Hawaiian Islands. His name was Thomas Brown. And he was given this stone in the 1700s because Thomas Brown's daughter had hemorrhaging blood. And apparently it was passed down in the family and given eventually to Brigham Young. And Brigham Young did something very interesting to it. So apparently it was more loaned to Brigham Young. And Brigham Young engraved Brigham on the front of it and Young on the back of it. But from this angle, it's hard to see. It's very thin. And Brigham Young actually had it recut and framed in gold. And in all of the photos that he's wearing it, there's a little watch chain that goes up, and there's a Freemason kind of compass that he would pair with it. Very fascinating stone, and apparently it went from the family to Young, back to the family, and then back to the museum here. And a lot of bloodstones, or especially seer stones, they do end up in the church vaults. And they do equate it with Native American folklore as well, because a lot of the very early seer stones that we know for a fact that people like Young and Joseph Smith used were kind of amulets that were worn on the chests of Native Americans and then found in the burial mounds. But fascinating stone. And if you want to see it, it's right through the front of the DUP Museum, right across from the State House.
First of all, my dad wrote a book called The Seers and Seer Stones. And in the Seers and Seer Stones book, he actually was really quite funny. He went to get different pictures at a bank, and it was in Salt Lake City, and he got there, and all these people started bringing in their different seer stones. There's this one, which was the Edwin Rushton stone. It's on the bottom. And that was at the bank, and then there were about 4 or 5 others that were seer stones that were brought in. This is at a museum, and this was Brigham Young's seer stone that he used. He actually used this more as a protective stone.
The Smith family arrived to Palmyra, New York in 1816, so from 1819 to 1822, Joseph Smith met with the most influential spiritualist in the village, a woman by the name of Sally Chase. Now, a few short years later, Sally Chase would actually go on to declare a spiritual war against Joseph Smith. But for the time being, it seems that Joseph Smith was more interested in treasure digging. Basically, this idea of using seer stones to find lost treasures or lost objects. And he went to go see Sally Chase, and she produced a small green stone, which she placed in her top hat, and she looked into it. So she told Joseph Smith, who was sitting across the table from her, that if he were to open his mind's eye, he could find his own seer stone. And sure as day, Smith said that he saw a vision of how to get to a stone in the shape of a baby's foot, pale white, underneath a log 150 miles away from Palmyra. And he went and got this stone. Now, apparently, as Joseph Smith was translating the Book of Mormon, he actually used a brown-colored stone. However, for the Book of Abraham, he gave this brown-colored stone to his friend and began using his original seer stone to translate the other books. But in 1827, the war with Sally Chase and her brother Willard Chase began, and this is the most fascinating aspect of this story, and I believe it deserves its own movie. So Sally Chase now sees that Joseph Smith is becoming an influential spiritualist and is actually writing his own religious books. So she uses her seer stone to peer into Joseph Smith's cabin and find the location of the golden plates. and she sends an angry mob to Joseph Smith's house and basically tears up the floorboards because she says it was underneath his fireplace. Of course, Joseph Smith, using his seer stone, saw a revelation that, he ought to move his plates before they were destroyed by Sally Chase.